How are you going to blame Joe Biden for something that happened after he left office?
They can't get their kid to the hospital because it's overcrowded. They can't get treatment at the school for reading difficulties because it's overcrowded.
Okay, I guess what I'm asking...
No, it's not.
But Horace,
yes, it is.
These are locally funded.
Horace, what I'm asking
from
you
federal dollars.
is, are you suggesting that people's actual lives, right, like these people who we're talking about who are dead, those lives are an appropriate price to pay for broader societal issues?
Where do you guys keep wanting to add these words in?
Because
because
I asked you a question and you responded by saying, well,
the
hospitals are overcrowded, the schools are overcrowded.
In today's video, Abby Phillip shuts down Horace Cooper on Newsnight with Abby Phillip. As more questions are raised about transparency, officer conduct, and public trust, the debate isn't just about enforcing immigration laws. It's about whether federal agencies are being held to the same standards of oversight as everyone else. So let's dive in and watch how Abby Phillip exposes Horace Cooper on Newsnight with Abby Phillip.
The DHS clearly understands, actually, that this is problematic.
Yes.
A couple days ago, Tom Homan said that he was brought in to clean up the mess in Minnesota. He had to discipline immigration officers for lying about an incident with an immigrant. Today, CNN is reporting that inside of DHS, officials have privately shared concerns. Repeated instances of ICE-involved shootings will derail public sentiment about the agency as Mullen is trying to rebuild on the heel of Kristi Noem's ouster. Markwayne Mullen came in saying the whole ballgame is trying to keep ICE out of the headlines. But when you're pushing, as Senator Angus King said, to 2,000 arrests a day, what happens is that you're increasing the likelihood that random people are going to get caught up in what they claim are targeted enforcement actions. So again, we can have a whole debate about how bad illegal immigration is. That's all fine. I don't think anybody is disagreeing that there has been a problem. Ashley just conceded that. But Horace, I'm asking you, it's about the conduct. Can we just talk for just 1 second about the conduct here and whether you think that this is a good look for any federal law enforcement agency?
No, I don't, and I've never suggested that. What I have suggested is that you can't sustain the cost associated with nearly 20 million people, and something absolutely has to be done.
So
working class and black people suffer the most.
People who committed no crimes, like the 2 immigrant men who were killed in the last week, like Alex Preddy and Renee Good, they're just collateral damage in trying to recruit some unknown amount of money that you say immigrants are responsible
for creating an environment where, in the effort to try to address this,
how are you going to blame Joe Biden for something that happened after he left office?
Their kid to the hospital because it's overcrowded. They can't get treatment at the school for reading difficulties because it's overcrowded.
Okay, I guess what I'm asking...
No, it's not.
But Horace,
yes, it is.
These are locally funded.
Horace, what I'm asking
from federal dollars.
is, are you suggesting that people's actual lives, right, like these people who we're talking about who are dead, those lives are an appropriate price to pay for broader societal issues?
Where do you guys keep wanting to add these words in?
Because because I asked you a question and you responded by saying, well, hospitals are overcrowded, the schools are overcrowded.
Most Americans believe the government has a responsibility to enforce immigration laws, but they also expect federal agents to operate professionally, transparently, and within clear legal standards. Those expectations shouldn't disappear simply because immigration is a politically charged issue. Abby's broader point is important because public trust in law enforcement depends on accountability, especially after deadly encounters. Over the past decade, police departments across the country have adopted body cameras, expanded de-escalation training, and strengthened independent review processes after studies showed these reforms can improve public confidence and provide clear evidence when force is used. Many of those same conversations are now happening around IC, particularly as the agency has dramatically expanded its enforcement operations. The scale of those operations also matters. when agencies are under pressure to significantly increase arrests, whether it's immigration enforcement or any other form of policing, experts have long warned that mistakes become more likely. High volume enforcement creates more interactions with the public, and with more encounters comes a greater risk of wrongful detentions, unnecessary uses of force, or tragic misunderstandings. That's why oversight becomes even more important during periods of aggressive enforcement. It's also worth remembering that immigration enforcement has never been just about numbers. Republican and Democratic administrations alike have deported millions of people over the last 3 decades, but they've differed on how enforcement should be prioritized. The real debate today isn't whether immigration laws should exist. It's about what safeguards should accompany their enforcement and how agencies maintain public trust while carrying out their mission. Another point that deserves attention is transparency after critical incidents. Most major law enforcement agencies now recognize that quickly. Releasing information, preserving evidence, and conducting independent investigations helps reduce speculation and rebuild confidence.
This is
I'm
good.
asking you,
I said
are the
that.
lives that are lost a price that you're willing to pay?
We're going to keep having lives lost until
American
we
lives
come up
by
with
illegal
a way
immigrants.
to deal with this problem.
Listen.
Whether it's American lives or whether it's immigrant lives, we
true.
allowed
Well,
a policy
here's the
that is
reality.
dangerous for the country.
As we've said many times, because it's true, immigrants commit fewer crimes than native-born Americans.
It should be
They are
zero.
not more responsible for crime than your neighbor who is a
should be
native-born
zero.
American.
I wanna
And so if you want to blame immigrants for crime, you got to actually prove it. And they've never, look, I've been sitting here waiting. Stephen Miller goes on TV every day. He talks about it. There's no actual proof that immigrants are driving an increase in
I
crime.
could say-
We're not
he
talking about
says it could be
immigrants.
zero.
We're talking about
I'm like,
illegal
okay, it
immigrants.
also
And I think
should be
there's a
zero
difference.
deaths by ICE. Like, is that not a...
We can
I
agree
could
with that,
agree
but
with you
first
on
of all,
that.
Abby,
All
this
right,
narrative,
let's let that be the last word since we all agree on that.
A country can enforce its immigration laws while also expecting federal agents to use force only when absolutely necessary and to be fully accountable when something goes wrong. The data also paints a more nuanced picture than the political rhetoric. Numerous studies over the past 2 decades have found that immigrants, including undocumented immigrants in several state-level analyses, are generally arrested or convicted of crimes at lower rates than native-born Americans. That doesn't mean crimes committed by undocumented immigrants don't matter. They absolutely do. But it does challenge the idea that immigration itself is the primary driver of violent crime in the United States. Public policy should be based on evidence, not broad assumptions about millions of people. What's often overlooked is that enforcement strategies themselves can influence public safety. When immigrant communities fear every interaction with law enforcement, they're less likely to report crimes, cooperate as witnesses, or come forward when they're victims themselves. Police chiefs in major cities have warned for years that maintaining trust with immigrant communities is critical because criminals benefit when victims are too afraid to contact authorities. Another issue is operational pressure. Whenever agencies are expected to dramatically increase arrests in a short period of time, the likelihood of mistakes naturally rises. We've seen similar concerns raised in policing, customs enforcement, and even military operations. High volume enforcement can create incentives that prioritize numbers over careful decision making, increasing the risk of wrongful stops or tragic encounters. That's why oversight, supervision, and clear rules of engagement become even more important during periods of aggressive enforcement. It's also encouraging that ICE has reportedly adjusted some enforcement tactics, including pausing many traffic stops after recent controversies. That suggests officials recognize that certain practices may be creating unnecessary risks for both officers and civilians. Agencies routinely modify procedures after reviewing incidents. That's a normal part of improving public safety, not an admission that law enforcement shouldn't exist.
ICE is pausing most traffic stops. And second, each ICE arrest team plans to have one agent wearing a body camera.
We see this pattern over and over with ICE, right? Where they pretend that these people weaponize their cars, despite the fact that we see the video And we know that that's not true, where they are targeting the wrong people. Neither of these two had criminal records. And most of the people that are getting detained and deported by ICE, and by most, I mean over 70%, don't have any criminal record. And so this, supposedly there have been policy changes after Minnesota, when we saw two blonde, blue-eyed U.S. citizens killed in the streets of Minneapolis. And now, months later, it's happening again.
Yeah,
and it feels, you know what it feels like for a person of color, for Latina immigrant? It feels like we are being hunted down by our government with impunity and absolutely zero accountability.
So, I mean, to Anna's point, I mean, the issues with these types of vehicular stops have been there for a long time. And in fact, in this main incident, they said that he was shot because there was a perceived threat to public safety. There's not a lot of information to support that, but one thing that is a threat to public safety is a moving vehicle with a deceased driver in it, which is one of the reasons that you really don't shoot and kill the person driving a moving car. So where is the accountability and even acknowledgement that there's a problem here from just a straight policing perspective?
Well, I think the acknowledgement is pretty clear. They've paused traffic stops, at least temporarily, and we'll see how long that lasts. I think every stop is different, I think. But one thing that should be the same, they should all be wearing body cameras. And I know that the provisions have been made to send them body cameras. I know they're going to have at least one body camera on every team. I can't help but think that the repeated shutdowns of the Department of Homeland Security caused a delay in getting these things deployed. But no matter, body cameras here would help the public a tremendous amount. Now, in the case of Maine, there is no video. There is at least one witness who says the person disobeyed repeated commands to stop, but we don't really know. And so I hesitate to jump to conclusions on it, other than to say this: every loss of life in any of these interactions is extremely regrettable. And it's not anything any of us should wish for. But figuring out what happened after the fact should be a lot easier than it is, and it would be made easier if the body cameras were deployed.
Scott, there is some video, and there's also eyewitnesses who witnessed the driver saying, "I tried to stop." Eyewitnesses who saw the little 3-year-old in the back of the car. I mean, you are a father. The idea that this 3-year-old is going to have to live the rest of her life with the image of her father's bloodied head because these ICE officers shot straight into this car. You see the bullets in the windshield and killed her father in front of her with her in the back seat. It's outrageous that is happening in the United States of America.
I think all of this was actually preventable. I've been working on police reform issues since I came out of law school. We've known body cameras are not the final solution, but when I was at the White House and Michael Brown was murdered or Philando Castile was murdered, Philando Castile's child also saw him murdered in cold blood by a police officer. And body cameras should have been implemented if you're going to deploy law enforcement. Well, I struggle to even call ICE law enforcement, but deploy ICE into communities at an aggressive rate in which they did, having quotas. This was avoidable, but this was an overreach. This was a go round folks up. And quite honestly, I do think from the top down, from Donald Trump to the Supreme Court, to Kristi Noem, to Mark Wayne Mullum, to Tom Holman, there has been this guilty until presumed innocent. And that is not actually how this country works when it is dealt with Black folks, but also now that it is brown people and this immigrants' rights justice.
Over the past decade, police departments across the country adopted them because they protect everyone involved. Officers are shielded from false accusations, and the public gets an objective record when force is used. Studies have shown that body cameras can improve evidence collection and increase public confidence in investigations. That's why many policing experts have argued they should be standard equipment whenever officers engage in high-risk operations. Waiting until after multiple controversial incidents to expand their use is the opposite of being proactive. Another Another issue is the pressure that comes with aggressive enforcement goals. Management experts have long warned that when organizations emphasize numerical targets, employees can start prioritizing hitting quotas over exercising careful judgment. Policing scholars have raised similar concerns for years, arguing that performance metrics should focus on safety, professionalism, and constitutional policing, not simply the number of arrests or detentions. There's also the human side that's easy to lose in political arguments. Children who witness deadly encounters often experience lasting psychological trauma, including anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress. Mental health researchers have documented how exposure to violence at a young age can affect emotional development for years. Those consequences don't disappear because the incident involved immigration enforcement instead of traditional policing. It's also worth remembering that due process isn't a partisan idea, it's a constitutional one. Whether someone is a US citizen or an immigrant, government officers are still expected to follow established procedures and use force only when necessary. That's one reason why independent investigations matter so much after deadly encounters. Accountability isn't about assuming an officer acted unlawfully, it's about making sure the facts are established through evidence rather than speculation. The broader concern is that public trust is incredibly difficult to rebuild once it's lost. Every high-profile incident without clear answers makes communities more skeptical, which in turn makes law enforcement's job even harder.